Greetings and welcome to the latest episode of Preserve the 80s. As promised earlier, today we'll be doing pepper steak fixed a little bit different way. There will also be rice, but I will get to that when the time is right. Here is what we will need to begin with. You will obviously need the steaks. This is London broil. I usually prefer to use chuck steak for this, but I could not procure any of that. But London broil, it works too. You'll want one purple onion, preferably a large one such as this. Probably going to end up using about 2 bulbs of this garlic. You're going to need sea salt, just typical table salt as well. Black pepper, ginger, basil leaves, celery salt, rosemary, cornstarch, soy sauce, and cooking wine, as well as some water and olive oil, which the olive oil is in the cabinet. You'll see that when the time comes. The water I will not be employing until it is time to make the sauce. And finally we have our peppers. They don't necessarily have to be red or green. They can pretty much be whatever color of bell pepper you want. The green ones at the store were a bit on the small side, so I got some red ones too. But those are the main ingredients for what you will need. The rice, as I said, I will be showing you those ingredients a bit later on. And the next thing that we're going to need to do is coat the steaks in sea salt, because this helps them to be a bit more tender and flavorful when they are cooked. My wife works remotely. I do not. I am currently on my lunch break, so I'm taking care of these early steps in the preparation now. We were talking about her being here around 7, but it all depends on what time she gets out of there. You realize that. But an important thing to do, as previously stated, is to cover your steaks with coarse sea salt. And just kind of pound it in. Ideally, you'll want to do this a few hours before you make the pepper steak, because it will, as I said, tenderize the meat, improve the flavor a bit. I do realize I'm making the salt go flying a bit, but you really do want to work it in there deep, but maybe with a little bit less verve than I did, because now I have some salt to clean up. Just a bit more controlled pressing will get the job done. So I'm going to wrap that up in some plastic wrap, and then I will proceed to cut up the peppers and onions and garlic in preparation for, well, not in preparation for the next step, it is the next step. So I will, that's going to be the next thing we do. As was the case with the Cornish hen video that I did a week or 2 ago, I'm not going to film the cutting up of the onions and peppers, because that's rather obvious. You know how to do that. But what I will show you is a bit of a trick to do with garlic when you have the whole cloves that haven't been pre-peeled by wherever you bought them from. If you want to get the skin off easily, you can just press it down. Not sure if that's in the picture. You can just press it down with a knife like this. Get out of the way. Just put the knife flat against the garlic, press on it, and that will make the skin very easy to peel away. usually easier than this. This garlic was just recently washed, so it's a bit wet. But normally that trick works for a much more speedy peel. Just make sure your garlic is dry first. And I don't want to cross the action. If you don't want to deal with the labor of chopping up the garlic with the knife, you can just put it into a garlic mincer like this, press it down, and then the shredded garlic comes out pretty as you please. Now that the garlic and onions and peppers have all been cut up, it's time to lightly season them before putting them into a Tupperware container, because they must sit for a while. I'm not yet ready to cook the steak. Just add a little bit of olive oil to the top. Sprinkle in some black pepper. And a little bit of just regular salt. And then just mix it up by hand. And that way everything just kind of mixes together. Flavors get a chance to mingle. And when the time comes to pour these into the pan for heating, you won't have to try to hastily delayer everything. And going with some different colors on the peppers, while it's not a vital step in the process, it can add a little bit of festivity to the air. Maybe you've had a hard day, perhaps you did $700 of work on a sibling's house and all you asked for in return was some deviled eggs, but you never saw those deviled eggs. And then you did $700 worth of work on another sibling's house and all you asked for was some meatballs and you never saw the meatballs. A colorful dinner will cheer you up. Now the time has come to cut the steak. You want to just make lengthwise cuts like this instead of going against the grain. It's just easier this way. And eventually you will have to cut against the grain once you're making the smaller piece of the steak, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. You also may want to cut out some of the fat. I don't know how, you don't want to get rid of all of it, but if you prefer a bit of a juicier, fuller, robust flavor, I'd recommend leaving some fat in, but in this case I wouldn't keep this much of it in. But as you can see, you just cube it. Not too much to that. And as I've frequently say when I'm chopping things, there's no point in watching me chop it all. You have nothing to gain from that, so I will stop filming at this point in the process and join you again when I arrive at the next step. Now it is time to put your sauce together. And the sauce can kind of make or break the flavoring. It's a step that some leave out, but I feel it's a very important step. A lot of recipes will tell you to use brown sugar or regular sugar when you're making this sauce, but I would advise against that. You don't want it to turn out sweet. You want it to have a savory flavor. I already have some garlic in there that was chopped earlier. You want to add a 1/4 cup of soy sauce. And that's about it there. Just pour it in. And then I don't have precise measurements for this. I just kind of do what feels right with celery salt, ground ginger, rosemary, basil leaves, tiny bit of olive oil, just a small pinch of salt, regular salt. Then you have this cooking wine, which doesn't need to go in the refrigerator. You just take a cap, well, I spilled a bit, but just take a cap and 2 capfuls you put into the sauce, because you don't get drunk with that. Not that you would if you put in more, but I think most people know the reference I'm making. Let's see, where did I put the measuring spoons? Well, while I search for those, enjoy a cameo appearance by my youngest cat, Luna. Luna says hello. So then the next step is to add 1.5 teaspoons of cornstarch. This is what will thicken the sauce a little bit, make it stick to the meat and the vegetables. Oh, I should not have put the spoons in there. And then, I should have done this earlier. Add about 1/8 cup of water. Then take a whisk and proceed to mix it up. If you're not experienced in working with cornstarch, it can be a very annoying substance to deal with. It really sticks to whatever it touches. It can be tough to clean up. But you want your sauce to look something like this in terms of color, consistency. If it looks like this, you're more or less on the right track. As promised, we will now prepare the rice. Ingredients we will need: obviously rice, salt, pepper, apple cider vinegar, butter, and capers. I have 2 jars here because I like a lot of capers in my rice, and there's not enough left in this jar to really make the rice capery enough for my taste. And you could just cook it using one of these rice cookers. They're pretty cheap, they're affordable. You can get them at most department stores, dollar stores, things like that. So you want to have 2 cups of rice. And there goes the lid. And by 2 cups, I don't mean cups in terms of liquid measurements. I mean cups in terms of what I'm using here, but I believe it's the same. I believe this is a 1 cup. And for every cup of rice that you use, you'll want to add 1 cup of water. Which means we will need 2. Then, when it comes to the butter, there's no hard rule, but I find a half a stick works. And then with the salt and pepper, it's basically what I like to do is do about a teaspoon of each. And then 1 teaspoon of the apple cider vinegar. And then you can put in the capers. You need to be careful if you're opening a new jar because they are stored in vinegar. Just want to get a little of that vinegar poured out first, so that when you pour the capers into the rice, it won't have an overwhelmingly vinegary flavor to it. That should be enough. Then just stir all that around. Get everything evenly mixed up and socialized. Then you can put your butter in. Then you close the rice cooker, obviously, since you don't want it open while it's cooking. You turn it on and hit the quick rice option. And in about 10 minutes or so, that will be ready for consumption. Now we are ready to begin some of the actual cooking that will take place. We're going to start with the vegetables. So first, pour some olive oil into a large frying pan such as this. And just kind of make sure the whole bottom surface is coated. Start out with medium-high heat. And the reason why this plate with the paper towels on top of it is here is that when the vegetables are finished cooking, I'm going to place some on that and then cook the steak in the same pot. And then once the steak reaches a certain point, I'm going to add the vegetables in with it. So you just pour them in there. And if you did not already add some olive oil, salt, and pepper to the vegetable mix, this would be a good time to do it. But seeing as how that has already been done, all you really need to do here is stir everything together. And once it starts heating up, you're just going to want to be very cautious, but gently feel for some softening in the peppers. And once you get to that level, you can take it off of the stove, off of the stove top, and pour it onto the plate as shown before. And then it will be time for cooking the steak. And since there are a lot of different steps to this recipe, it would behoove you to, in between steps, clean off the various equipment, such as the cutting boards, the Tupperware containers, the knives and such. That way there's less cleanup work left to be done once you are enjoying your meal. Or I should say after you enjoy the meal. So the next step will be to cook the steak. So now we are getting closer to the home stretch. We're getting closer to having the finished product. These vegetables are at just about the right temperature, so I'll be removing them from the pan. They must go onto this plate, but slowly and carefully is the way to do it. And then just take a bit more olive oil to coat the surface again. There will be some residual olive oil when the vegetables were cooking, but you want to add a bit more. And at this point, you want the heat turned down to medium. So then you take your chopped steak, you just let it all go in there. Exactly how much steak you use will be a function of how many people you're cooking for, how big the appetites are. If I were just making this for myself, it would be about a pound. My wife doesn't eat quite as much as I do, so I have about 1.5 pounds of steak here. But you can really adjust that for whoever you're serving. And make sure that each piece of steak is making contact with the bottom of the pan. Because if it does not, it's going to take quite a bit longer to cook. You can have it slightly higher than medium, but I wouldn't go higher than a 6 out of 10. A 6 out of 10. That annoying beeping is the rice. The rice is done. We will take a look at that soon. In the meantime, this meat will continue to cook, and I shall also add a bit of black pepper to it. And a little bit of ginger. And just kind of spread it around, but everything mixed evenly. And when the meat starts to brown on one side, you can flip it, start cooking it on the other until all sides are brown. If you're worried about it not having cooked through all the way, take out one piece of meat, cut it open, and see that it's not red in the center, and you will be in good shape. The steak is nearly done cooking now. Once it's browned, you'll want to drain off the excess grease. And you can do that by taking a pot like this and a strainer, put it on top of there, just spoon out the meat into the strainer so that you're not just tipping the pan and having the meat go everywhere. You just get the meat in there, then you pour the grease in, it goes through the strainer. And once it's done that, you can just tip the strainer over, put the meat back into the pan. With the exception of one piece that still looks a little rare for my liking, this is just about done. So, actually no, that piece is okay. So now we add the vegetables back in. And if you want, you can cook this with mushrooms as well. I ran out of mushrooms, so I didn't do that this time around. But once you have your meat back in the pan, grease-free, and your vegetables in, you're not going to want to wait too long before adding the sauce because the pan's a bit dry at the bottom. So, sauce has been sitting a while, so you want to give it another whisking to really get the cornstarch well circulated. And then you just pour it over, kind of a spiral pattern like that. and then mix it together. You want the sauce to coat everything pretty evenly, so you gotta stir it around a bit. And it will thicken as it's stirred within the pot because it's kind of congealing with some of the grease, some of the olive oil, juices from the meats and vegetables, from the meat and vegetables. So just stir it around, get an even coating. And once you can start to see it really stick, oh, I just lost a piece of steak. The steak will take on a bit of a darker color. You'll notice bits of the minced garlic sticking here and there. And once you reach that level, well, once it's more consistent that you're seeing the change in color and the vegetables sticking to the meat, and then you can turn off the heat because you are done cooking your pepper steak. So now we are just about ready to eat. The rice has been prepared, and it may be worth your while once the rice is finished to go in there and stir it up a bit, just to make sure that the butter, the pepper, capers, everything else, they get spread around nice and evenly. Then you can take a ladle such as this and pour some of your, or spoon some of the steak on there, but I'm actually going to take the plate down first because it's a bit hard to do this one-handed. And with those maneuvers complete, you now have a plate of pepper steak fixed a little bit different way. Obviously, you can have whatever you want as a beverage. I find that lemonade pairs with it exceptionally well, which is why I will be having some of this. It is Milo's lemonade, 100% natural, family made since 1946. And I find this to be a good lemonade because it's not overly sweet, not overly sour. It tastes very much like a homemade lemonade. It's quite refreshing, and it goes very well with pepper steak. That just about sums up the video for today. I hope you enjoy this recipe. If there are any tweaks you think I should make, feel free to leave some comments and let me know. Farewell. So just a bit of a final thought. I made a mistake in the recipe. I forgot to include the chili powder, and I forgot to include the cayenne pepper. I didn't realize that until I started to eat the pepper steak, and it was quite bland. Some people may prefer it that way, but I do not. It was quite lacking, but I added some post-cooking, made things a bit better, but it really has to cook in the chili powder and the cayenne pepper. You need to add both of those if you want your pepper steak to have that kick to it. And for leaving that out, I am truly sorry.